Hi there, my name is Cathi from Software Solutions, and you're looking at one of a collection of videos that go with my Excel Level 3 data manipulation course. All the sorts of tips and tricks and tools you would use if you're a person who works with large lists. This particular video, I want to introduce you to advanced filtering and I want to introduce you to macros. All right. So I'm going to start by first of all asking you to go to the sheet called targets. Now this is in the file that accompanies the Excel Level 3 course. So the Excel 3 file, I've opened it and I've saved it as Excel 3-1, the first copy of this file, and I'm working with a sheet called targets. Now advanced filtering is very, very good. In the first video of this course, we looked at filtering, and that was turning on Control-Shift-L, hitting the drop down, filtering out, say, all the ones from Auckland, and OK. And so what it did is it hid all the records that didn't come from Auckland. And in fact, only shows us 18 records. So advanced filtering is good when you want to hide those records that are not required. It's called filter in place of selection. But then what I do is I watch people and then they go and select that data, they copy it, they go to a new sheet and they paste it. So their reason for filtering was to extract those records that meet a certain criteria. Well, you don't have to do that. You don't have to filter and then copy and paste those records to a new location. Advanced filtering naturally wants to copy those records that match a really potentially complex criteria and put them somewhere else. So advanced filtering copies to another location and it handles really complex criteria, which this type of filtering only gets you so far. Let me demonstrate. So I'm just going to clear the filter. In fact, I'm going to turn the filter off. What I'd like to do is insert a new sheet. So I'm just going to hit my circle and my plus here for a new sheet. This is where I'm going to want the results to go to. So I'm going to double click the sheet name and call it advanced. So this is my advanced sheet. Targets, this is my database or my list where I'm going to extract from. And in fact, I've named this list target list. Let me hit the drop down on the name box and choose target list. So the list is called target list. If you're not sure how to make named ranges, please watch the video before this video, which shows you how to make these named ranges. So we've named the list target list. This is what we want to extract records out of, and we want to put them into the sheet called database. Now, for reasons of integrity, I actually want to protect this list so there's no chance that it can accidentally be screwed up. So I'm going to right-click the target's sheet name, and I'm going to choose Protect Sheet. Now, Microsoft fails to mention that a password is in fact optional, so you don't have to put a password. So because I'm protecting against accidental screw up, I'm not going to worry about a password, I'm just going to go OK. So now if I try to overwrite anything, I can't. The data integrity is intact because the data is protected. Not password protected, but it's protected. Okay, so the data is protected, it's named targets list, now go to advanced. Okay, in the advanced sheet, let me hold the control key and wheel in a little bit, is where we type a criteria. A criteria is a range of cells that define what you're after. I'm wanting to extract records from the targets list that come from certain regions. So I'm going to type region. Now don't press space and don't put an S on the end. That word region must be perfectly like that, because what Excel's going to do is it's going to go to the targets list and look for a column called region. And if you've called it regions or region space, it won't find this column. So in the advanced sheet, we've typed region, and then under that we say what we're after. So I'm going to say, for example, that I want to find all those from Tauranga, Rotorua, Taupo, and Whakatane. Now each line is read as an OR. So you're saying you want to filter out the column called region, where the record has the region Tauranga or Rotorua or Taupo or Whakatane. That's our criteria. So I select this group of cells, and in my name box, I'm actually going to name it CRIT, short for criteria, 1, because it's my first criteria. Crit 1 and enter. Press enter, ensure that it takes it. So let's look at the elements we need. If I hit the name box drop down, I can see I've got a list called target list. I've got a criteria called crit 1. And where I want to copy the results to is immediately below the criteria. So let's say A7. So I sit in A7 and I want to do an advanced filter. So I go to data in the ribbon. And here's the button called advanced. So I click advanced. And this wee window comes up. Now the reason I'm wanting to do an advanced filter is because I want to copy the results to another location. So I choose that option. Work your way down addressing every single option. So don't skip any. So the first action is copy to another location, and then I click in here. Then it says, where's your list? What is your list range? Now at this point, if I didn't use named ranges, I'd have to run off to the sheet, go to the top, drag across, drag down, and select the entire list. And that can be time consuming. But because we named the list, target list, we press the function key F3. F3 brings up always a list of things you've named. And I can double click target list. So the list is called target list. That's why I got you to put the word list in the name so that you can make the connection. If I click in the next field and press F3, the criteria is called crit 1. Double click. So the connection there is crit and crit, list and list. Our list is called target list. Our criteria is called crit 1. If I click in the next field, it says, where do you want to copy it to? At this point, I would advise that you just click on the cell where you want to copy the answers to. So I'm going to click here, A7. So you don't actually type anything. You just click and press F3 and double click. All right, so I'm going to go OK. And that has pulled out from the targets list all those records where the region is Tauranga, Rotorua, Taupō, Whakatane. And as you scroll down, that's exactly what you've got here, just those ones. There's no Auckland, there's no Hamilton, there's no Christchurch, there's no Wellington. So it's extracted those records that meet your criteria. What it doesn't do is it doesn't sort out the column width. So let's do that. I'm going to click above row 1 to select the entire sheet. I'm going to double the width of, say, column B by dragging this line between B and C to the right. That allows plenty of room for last name and some of these last names further down to fit on one line. So now I need to bring the row heights of all of these rows up. So I double click the line between two row numbers while I've got all the cells selected. And that will bring up all the rows. Now what I do is double click the line between two column letters to bring the columns back in. So we selected the entire sheet, dragged and doubled the width of a column, and they all doubled. Brought the rows up with a double click, brought the columns back with a double click, and you've tidied up your rows and columns. Okay, now an advanced filter is a snapshot in time. These are the records at that very moment from Tauranga, Rotorua, Taupō and Whakatane. If the data changes, I've got to redo the advanced filter. So how do we do that? I would advise that you go to A7 and I want to select all the data. Now I could go Control A, but I have intentions of doing a macro. So I'm going to actually start using Control Star. Control Star and delete. That deletes the data that we dropped last time. I'll then click back in A7 and I'll repeat the advanced filter. I'll go to data in the ribbon and I'll choose advanced. I want to copy to another location. I click in the list field, I press F3 and my list is called target list. Double click. Drag over this stuff, delete it, press F3. My criteria is crit 1. Drag over this stuff, delete it. I want to copy it to A7. It's best to drag over any sort of legacy or legacy data and just clear it, just to be absolutely sure that what you're putting in is correct. So we want to copy to another location. Our list is called target list. Our criteria is called crit1, and we want to copy it to A7. Now, as soon as I go OK, that's the records at this point in time that come from those 4 regions. So if each week you have a large amount of data that you acquire and you want to extract just certain ones, just do an advanced filter, wipe last week's data and just do an advanced filter, and it will extract those records. So that's quite a repetitive task, quite straightforward. You just repeat those steps every single time. This is when the macros come in. What is a macro? A macro is you telling Excel to record your steps. So if you have a task that you perform on a repetitive basis, it is a perfect candidate for a macro. You tell Excel to start watching you and recording what you do. Then you tell Excel to stop recording. And the next time you have to perform that task, you don't. You run the macro and it just repeats your steps and does it for you. It's like recording your favorite program and watching it over and over again, or you're recording your steps and you play it over and over again. So let's start by creating a macro that wipes this data and redoes the advanced filter. Now there's a variety of ways that you can record a macro. I find the easiest way is to hit this little button down here on the status bar. It's a little square with sort of a circle on it and it says no macros are currently recording. Click to begin recording a new macro. Now if you don't have that button, you have to right click down here and you have to turn macro recording on. If I untick that, that button just disappeared. If I retick it, the button just reappeared and then I just click away. So get that button up. Now it doesn't matter where you're sitting. You can be sitting anywhere and you just click that button. This little window comes up. Now I want to give the macro a name, and macro names are like range names. You're not allowed spaces. So I'm going to call it CRIT1 filter, crit1 filter. No spaces. I'm not worried about shortcut keys. We'll get into that later. And I do want to store the macro in this workbook. And the description is just your opportunity to claim to fame. So I can say created by Cathi Barker, January 2023. Things like that. So if I go OK, whatever I do now is recorded. Whatever I do now is actually going to be written in code. So notice I'm not racing. You don't have to race. In fact, it's better not to. Stop and think. And make it that every action you do is for a reason. It's deliberate. So the first action I want it to record me doing is to click on A7. So I'll click there. So I am in the right place. Because the second action I'm going to ask it to record is me pressing Control Star. So I needed to be in A7 first and then press Control Star. The third action is to press the delete key. So it deletes the last lot of data that I dropped. Then I'll click back in A7. That's the fourth action the macro records. And the fifth action I want it to record is me doing the advanced filter for a third time. I click on data and I click on advanced. I copy to another location. I click in the list range, I press F3 and I double click target list. I might press tab, F3 and now choose crit1. So that crit1 replaces what's in there. I'll press tab and then I'll click on A7. So again, copy to another location. My list is called target list, my criteria is called crit1 and I want to copy it to A7 and OK. So the macro records you doing the advanced filter, but let's not stop there. Now I want to record tidying up the rows and columns. And you might look at it and go, well, it's already tidy. It is already tidy, but that's not always necessarily going to be the case. So I want to make sure that it's always going to be tidy. So we'll go through the motions of tidying it. So click above row 1 to select the entire sheet. Drag the line between A and B or B and C and double the width of the column. Double click the line between any 2 row numbers to bring the row height up. Double click the line between any 2 column letters to bring the columns in. click on A1, and basically you've finished recording your macro. To stop recording, your button is now appearing on the bottom of your screen as a hollow square, and it says a macro is currently recording. Click to stop recording. The one thing that a lot of my students forget to do is to stop recording. So make sure you stop recording. Otherwise you end up recording your entire day's work and ultimately crash your machine. So I'm just going to stop recording by clicking that, and I've made a macro. So how do we run the macro? Well, there's a variety of ways that you can run a macro. What I want to do with this particular spreadsheet is start with creating a button. And so we're going to draw a shape about here, which will effectively be a button that they click whenever they want to filter out the regions. So let's go to Insert and let's go to Shapes. There's a variety of shapes, but the one that looks most button-esque is probably this beveled rectangle. So I'm going to choose rectangle beveled. And then I don't know how big or tall or wide, so I just drag and I make a button. I'll sort it out later. So now I type what text I want to appear on the button. Click here to filter regions. Now that I've typed my text, I can resize my button to accommodate that text. I can drag the edge of the button and get it sitting exactly where I want it to sit. I can even go up to here, shape styles, and choose maybe an orange or an aqua or a purple or a green. I'll just maybe go for an aqua look. There's different styles in here. So I'll go for this one. I might even click on the text and go Control E, which is short for center, and that centers the text in the button. Now, I also don't want the button to print. If I go Control P and look at the print preview, the button at the moment would actually print, and I don't want it to print, so I'm going to press Escape. If I right-click the edge of the button, it has to be the edge of the button, you'll then get the option Size and Properties. And if I go into Size and Properties, particularly this task pane here, and hit the chevron in front of Properties, what I want to tell it to do is don't print this object. So I take this tick off. And because I am resizing rows and columns, I also don't want the button to move or size with the cells. So I'm going to choose this option. Don't move or size this button with cells, just let it sit on top, and don't print this button. And so now I can close that task pane. And if I just did a quick check by going Control P, I can see that the button wouldn't print, and press Escape to get back. So many objects like buttons and slices and things like that that you put on your spreadsheet can be visual aids, but they're not necessarily something that you want printed. Okay, we've made our macro, we've made our button. Let's join the two together. If you right-click the edge of the button, you get the option Assign Macro. It has to be the edge of the button. So if you don't see Assign Macro, you haven't right-clicked the edge of the button. So right-click the edge of the button, choose Assign Macro, and really there's only one listed, Crit 1 Filter. So I click it. Make sure you click the macro and choose it. Now if I choose OK, and there's my description created by Cathi Barker, January 2023. If I click OK, then I've assigned the macro to the button. And so I click away, and if I click on the button, it now just runs the macro. Fast as anything. Nothing seems to happen much. What if I change Rotorua, because I can see Rotorua here, to say Auckland? When I press enter, now I'm saying Auckland. So now I might think, right, I want actually Auckland, Hamilton, let's go geographically down, Wellington, and Christchurch. Christchurch goes slightly over the column width, but don't worry, our macro is designed to tidy up the columns. So then we click here to filter the regions, and those records are now from Auckland, Hamilton, Wellington, and Christchurch. If I want to move the button over a little bit, right-click it, then left-click its edge, and just drag it a little bit. So you have to right-click it and then left-click it, because if you just left-click it, it just keeps running the macro. Excellent. They do have to put in 4 regions. It has to have 4. It's not designed to do 5 unless you inserted a row in between the words region and Christchurch. If you inserted a row in between those two, it would take it. If you only wanted Auckland, you would click on Auckland and maybe use the thin black cross. Let me just move you over a little bit again. Click on Auckland, drag the thin black cross down and repeat it. Then when you click the filter, it'll give you just the ones from Auckland. So all 4 cells have to be populated, either with the same thing in all 4 cells or different things in every single cell. Now the other thing to notice is, notice I can't undo. I've run the macro, I've changed the regions, I've run the macro and I can't undo it. Often when a macro runs, you can't undo what it did. So bear that in mind because that can have consequences. So I'm just going to put back in here Auckland, Hamilton, Wellington, and Christchurch. And then if I hit my button, it should give me everything. Okay, now that we've created a macro, I would like to save my file. And when I go to save my file, it's going to have a little bit of a hissy fit because this file is an Excel workbook. An Excel workbook is an XLSX file. An Excel workbook is designed to be macro free. You can't put macros in an Excel workbook, an XLS file. You have to save the file as a macro enabled workbook, slightly different file format. Let me show you. So if I go to save this file, this error comes up. The following features cannot be saved in a macro free workbook. VB project. Okay, so your macro is code written in a language called Visual Basic for application, VB. To save the file with these features, click No and choose a macro-enabled file type. If you don't, there's a chance you'll lose your macro. So choose No, and when this comes up, you'll be able to say, I don't want to save it as an Excel workbook, hit the drop down. I want to save it as an Excel macro-enabled workbook, which is actually an XLSM file. And I'll save it on my desktop as soon as it lets me, and save. So now this is a macro enabled workbook and now I know my macro is saved. So that's an advanced filter, that's a macro, and that is a button. Now if you want to see your code, if I ever get a spreadsheet and I'm like, oh, they've assigned a macro to that button, can I have a look at that macro? Right click the button, that is the edge of the button. Assign macro as if you were going to assign it. But instead of choosing a macro and assign, just choose edit to look at and edit the code that goes with that macro. When I go edit, let me bring this into view, this window pops up. This is your code. Your macro is a sub procedure, sub, n sub. Your macro is called crit1 filter. That's the name of the macro, one word. Anything green is because it's got apostrophe in the front. And an apostrophe means this is a comment. So the comment is created by Cathi Barker, January 2023. The steps that this macro undergoes is it selects the cell A7. Then this step is your control star to select the current region. This step, clear contents, is you pressing delete key. Then you went back and chose A7. These 2 steps aren't actually needed, so I can delete those. Then it does an advanced filter. The criteria is called crit1, the list is called target list, and you want to copy it to A7. Then it selects, let me just put an enter in there, then it selects all the cells. And it makes the width of those cells 23.71. You might have dragged yours further or less. I might make them 30, for example, or even 20. Makes all the columns 20, auto fits the entire rows, auto fits the entire columns, and then goes back and sits on the cell A1. This is called Visual Basic for applications. This is the code that's being written when you record a macro. This is why you have to save it as a macro-enabled workbook. This is what they call the Visual Basic editor, where you get to edit the Visual Basic for applications code. sub and end sub, your macro is a sub procedure called crit1 filter. I can exit out of here by hitting the X in the top right corner, and I'm back to Excel. So we'll look at the Visual Basic Editor in more detail, but that's our first advanced filter, our first macro, our first button to run our macro, and make sure that the button doesn't print and change, for example. Let's now do another advanced filter. I'm just going to take a copy of this information here and put it in J1. I'll just reduce the width of this a little bit and double click here. So I'm going to do a second criteria. I do want these 4 regions, but let's say I want the region Auckland, where the actual value is greater than 1500 and the actual value is less than 2000. When you put things on the same line, such as this and this and this, it is read as an AND. So I'm after the region Auckland and greater than 1500 and less than 2000, or all the ones from Hamilton. Let's narrow it down. All the ones from Hamilton that are greater than equal to 1000, that's how you would put greater than equal to, and less than equal to, say, 1500. Maybe all the ones from Wellington are greater than 1000 and less than 1500, and all the ones from Christchurch. No restriction on actual. You can write really complex criterias out to the right as far as you want to go, this and this and this and this and this. So the first row is always the column name, and then I want this and this and this and this and this and this out to the right. As soon as you go down, you're saying or Hamilton and this, or Wellington and this, or Christchurch. So this is our second criteria. I'm going to select this range here. I'm going to go to my name box and I'm going to name it CRIT 2, crit 2. I'm going to click in the cell J7 and I'm going to run my advanced filter. I go to data, I go to advanced, copy to another location. My list, F3, is called target list. My tab, F3, criteria is now crit 2, not crit 1. Tab, F3, I want to copy it to, cancel. I want to copy it to J7, just click it. So I want to copy the results to another location. My list is called target list, my criteria is called crit 2, and I want to copy it to J7, and okay. It brings the data through. Of course, it doesn't bring through nice and tidy columns. We could go through and tidy up the columns, but part of the DNA of this button and this macro here is to tidy up the row and columns. So I'm just going to click this button. If you click this button, not only will it redo the advanced filter, but it'll tidy up the rows and columns. And it just did it. So that's brilliant. Now, let's just decide to do another macro. So that's our advanced filter. You'll see that the list is substantially shorter than the list on the left-hand side, even though it's the same 4 regions. It's substantially shorter on the right-hand side because the actual values have to fall within a certain range. So anything that you see from Auckland will be between 1500 and 2000. And there are actually no records from Auckland between that range. But those from Hamilton will be greater than 1000 and less than 1500. And that's the case of these 3 here, which is 1300, and these 3 here, which are 1420, and these last ones, which are 1200. So I know that the advanced filter is working. But I want to automate it now with a macro. So it doesn't matter where I'm sitting, I click this button. The name of my macro this time is crit 2 filter, and again I could put created by Cathi Barker, January 2023, and I'll go okay. Okay, what do I want to record doing? First thing I want to record doing is getting rid of that data starting in J7. Now I'm already in J7, but I must record going to J7 because I'm about to then select all the data and press delete. So if I'm not in the right place, that's going to be huge. So click in J7, press Control Star, press delete. So that records getting rid of that. Click back in J7 and do your advanced filter again. Data, advanced, copy to another location. My list F3 is called target list. Tab F3, my criteria is called crit 2. Tab and click, I want to copy it to J7 and then OK. So that copies it. I'm not going to worry about going through the motions of tidying up because I've got something up my sleeve for that. But I do want to go through the motions of narrowing column I. So I'm just going to right click column I and set the column width to probably 3 and OK. So it's nice and tidy. And then record clicking on J1. So it ends there. And so now I'm ready to stop recording. So I hit my little square down here and stop recording. So we recorded our macro. Now we've got to make our button or whatever we use to run the macro. Instead of a button this time, let's choose a picture because you can use any object. If you can click it, then you can assign a macro to it. So let's go insert, instead of shapes, and you could choose any shape, let's go pictures. And I'm going to go online pictures. And I want to find a picture, something to do with sales. So I'm actually going to search Bing for sale or sales. When I press enter, I get all these pictures. Maybe I will take out the S and just put sale. Yeah, I just want something small. Maybe this button here. So I'll click this and insert it. It's going to come through real big. So I'll just go to width over here and type 3 and enter. And that sets the width to 3, which naturally adjusts the height to 3, which makes it easy for me then just to physically then drag it and adjust it. So I want to put the button over here. So this is my sales button. So now I've got my object, I right click it and I go into its size and properties. I say I don't want to print it and I don't want to move it. So I set those two properties and I close that. I right click my button and I choose assign macro. And I choose not my crit 1 filter, but my crit 2 filter. And OK. Now, if I click away from the button and click on it, it will just run my code. If I change Auckland to say Taupo and click the button, then I get some Taupo records. Now, what we didn't record was tidying up the rows and columns, and there was a reason for that. What I'm going to do is right-click this button, assign macro as if I had intentions of assigning, but I'm just going to go edit, because then I can see the code. Now, the difference between the crit 1 filter and the crit 2 filter macros is this section here is missing. This is the section that said select all the cells, make the column width 20, auto-fit the rows, auto-fit the column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this 1, 2, 3, 4 rows, 4 lines, and I'm going to copy it. Now where I want to put that is probably above this statement here. Click in front of range J1, press enter a couple of times, 3 times to be exact, arrow up and paste. And I'm just pasting, I can backspace that to tidy it. So basically this is going to select J7, the cell, select the current region, delete it, go back to J7. You don't have to do those 2 statements, the cut copy modes can come out. Go to J7, select the current region, clear the contents, go back to J7. Do an advanced filter, then enter. Select column I and make its width 3 characters. Select all the cells. Make them 20 characters wide. Auto-fit the row, auto-fit the column. Actually, adjusting column I needs to come after this because this is setting all the columns to 20. So I need to cut this out. Right click. You can use Control X and Control C. So cut that out. I'll use the right click because it's easier to see in the demonstration. So I'm just going to put that under here, paste. And just tidy things up. So you can delete and backspace. Just be careful. You can always go undo. You've got an undo button up the top here as well. So now it selects J7, selects the current region, clears the data, goes back to J7, does the advanced filter, selects all the cells, sets all the columns to 20, adjust the row height, adjust the column width. Then select just column I and set column I to 3 characters wide, and then stop in J1. I'm going to save that. There's my save button there. So you can save in the Visual Basic Editor or in Excel. It's one file at the end of the day. I'm going to close the Visual Basic Editor. Now if I went to click this, it adjusts all the columns nicely, and click this, adjusts all the columns nicely. Then I click this, puts column I back. This one needs to be told to make I 3 characters wide, because this one makes them all 20, and then this, and then tidies them, and then this one does the same, but it makes I 3 characters wide. Let's right click this button. Let's just move it over for a second too. Right click, assign macro, edit. Let's grab these 2 lines here. Let's copy them. Let's put them after auto fit, paste them. So I'll right click and I'll paste. All right. So then this macro will go to A7, select the current region, clear the contents, go back to A7, do the advanced filter, select all the cells, make all the columns 20, auto fit the rows, auto fit the columns, go particularly to I and make that 3 characters wide, and then go to A1. Save that, close that. If you now click this button, it's perfect. If you click this button, it's perfect. Column I always stays 3 characters wide. I hope you've enjoyed that. That is advanced filtering, when you want to copy those results from another sheet and put them into another sheet. All the while, the integrity of this data is beyond question, because this sheet is protected. So this data can't be changed, but we can still do advanced filtering. The advanced sheet is basically doing an advanced filter, deleting this data, doing the advanced filter, tidying everything up. And these are macros that you can right click and assign macro and edit and go and have a nosy. So you've created 2 macros, exit. You've created 2 buttons, one's a picture and one's actually a shape. You've done 2 advanced filters, really good stuff. When you have a large amount of data and you need to, on a regular basis, extract records that meet a certain conditions for your weekly or monthly reporting. There are more exercises in the notes. Give those a go. Crit 3, Crit 4, Crit 5, Crit 6, Crit 7. Repetition is the mother of skill. Practice is the answer. I do hope you've enjoyed this video. Please like it, please subscribe, and please come back for some of the more videos and let me show you some of the really good stuff you can do in Excel. Thank you. Ka kite. Bye-bye.